they'll be able to identify you and readdress the questions by name. Now, I guess I could tell another hour's worth of great Doug stories, but somebody actually asked me, why did I get Doug Phelan? It's like, I'm the rail expert. There's other people in here that are rail experts. But Doug is extremely knowledgeable on literally anything that moves. And he's been doing it. He's probably a wonk like me. He knows all of the things, what would be if you put a light rail down the middle of the high desert corridor. Doug actually figured it out. Then I found some documents. I don't know whether Doug actually did this, but I found documents that showed how you would create a rail line down the Glenn Anderson Freeway, and you would go to the North Coast Extension, and it was prepared by Caltrans. I don't know whether you had your fingers on that, but it was like back in the days when you actually typed up reports. There weren't computers. And just amazing that all this work had been done. And then we finally got the sales tax measures somewhere in the 70s and the 80s, and we could finally, instead of talking about things, we could build things. And build we've got, and keep doing it. So tonight we have Doug Phelan, and he's, I forget his current title at Metro, but he was, I think, handpicked and recruited by Art Leahy, and here he is tonight. So welcome, and give a big hand to Doug.
Thank you, Bart. And it was more than a couple of months, I remember absolutely, but we did get them in. And I was shocked that we didn't have them when we got here. We actually thought we had some, but they didn't work. So the idea was to get something that actually worked and people could use. Yeah, you're welcome. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing today. I know that Bart's been busy putting things out to promote. Some of the people come up to me and say, did you see what Bart says you're going to talk about? I says, no, I'm trying not to look and see what Bart says I'm going to talk about. I will talk about rail elements. We have rail elements in a number of our projects today, so I'm going to cover more than just one project. But we're going to cover one project at least a little bit. And then we'll, the whole idea is for me to talk until you guys look bored. Well, you look bored already. But that's okay. We'll talk until most of you look bored, and then we'll open it up to questions. Okay? So, the first one I think is one that a lot of you came here for, is State Route 710. State Route 710, sometimes called 710 North, sometimes called the Gap Closure, is a project that's been on the books since before I had a driver's license. In Measure I, when it was passed by the voters in 2008, they put in an amount of money to look at closing the gap of SR 710. We at Metro have started an environmental document to look at closing that gap. We are a transit agency, and we said as a part of closing that project, we need to look at a range of alternatives. So we have traditional highway alternatives in there. We looked at a number of alternatives. We have one that's going forward in the environmental document. We also have the usual no-build alternative. Everyone's familiar with that one. We have the usual TSM, TDM alternative where you look at enhancing some transit in the area and fixing some intersections. We have two very, very good transit type projects that are developing as part of that alternative that we're putting forward. And we're going to talk about those two alternatives today. The first one, okay, so here it is. There's the corridor. There's the area. Does anyone not know where this gap is? Okay, so most of you know that one. There's the facts you've all seen in the past. The light rail alternative is really exciting to us, and Bart and I were chatting about this a little bit because he said, Doug, can you put in a serious light rail alternative into an environmental document you're doing and make it a serious alternative? And we have worked very hard. We've got great input from the public as we're doing the alternatives analysis, and we're really excited about this as an alternative in this project. It is potentially a very viable alternative. We've taken a lot of really good input as to what would make this the most viable alternative possible, and we're looking forward to continuing to do the technical studies so we can produce the data that's necessary so that sometime next year when the draft environmental document comes out, we'll have good data on what this alternative can do in the region versus the other alternatives that we're looking at. The alternative is extended. It isn't the traditional 10 to 210 alternative. Because as we started looking at the alternative and this came up, we realized that in order to make this alternative more viable, we had to go past Metrolink And we actually had to connect it down to the light rail system, the existing gold line down in East LA, the unincorporated county area. So this alternative goes from Fillmore Station in Pasadena. It's proposed as an underground station at that location. So if you got off at the Fillmore Station from the gold line today, you make a vertical transfer down to this station. It roughly follows the existing alignment as has been proposed generally for the 710 freeway for years. It comes out of the ground south of Valley Boulevard, climbs up so that there's a station and interchange at Cal State LA. We recognize Cal State LA and the ability to access Metrolink was important. And then it starts coming down the hill and varies in. We're looking at both above grade, so on the left-hand side as you're facing it, you can see what above grade would look like, and on the right-hand side, you can see what below grade looks like. As you travel down south of 710, south of the 10 freeway towards the 60, we're looking at both above grade and below grade alternatives, so that we can do a vertical transfer then down at in East LA near the Mednick station, that general area. So that would make this approximately 7 miles in length. We're looking at a tunnel diameter, a typical light rail tunnel diameter. Those of you that are familiar with the work that we're doing on regional connector and other places where we have light rail lines, would be a very typical light alternative for that one. Cover depth would be 50 to 75 foot in depth for one using about 2 diameters. And we're really pleased with the interconnectivity that is built. Most of you know that the existing rail system that we have here in Los Angeles is really a hub and spoke system. You've got Union Station and 7th and Metro as the hubs. Then you have a series of spokes on the various rail systems, whether it's light rail or Metro or whatever, that comes into these hubs and then forms them. What you begin to do at the end of the day as your system matures, you begin building beltways. So this is the beginning of that beltway, if you will, go from the gold line up in Pasadena down to the gold line again in East LA, starting to form the beginning of a belt around those hubs and spoke systems. So very interesting concept. We're looking forward to how the ridership numbers come out and how this is going to serve the purpose and need, hopefully, for this corridor. So we'll be exploring that, and the data will be out. We're thinking winter, late winter, early spring, so early part of next calendar year, the draft environmental document will be out. Right, Linda? Okay.
Oh, okay.
But in addition to that, there's another alternative that we don't want to ignore. We've had great success here in Los Angeles with our bus rapid system. We have the Orange Line, which is really more of a true bus rapid transit system than the bus rapid systems that we've been using, the BRT line. So we're looking at a BRT alternative within this corridor as well. This gives us a lot greater flexibility in how you service the public than you do in a traditional fixed rail system, because you can move the system. And for instance, we're looking at a route in Pasadena that circles both Pasadena City College and Caltech. Comes down on Del Mar towards Fair Oaks Avenue. We come down Fair Oaks Avenue to Huntington Drive, go up Huntington Drive to Atlantic, and then come down Atlantic Avenue. Again, it has to go past the 10 freeway, and it goes actually past the light rail station, the southern part of the Gold Line. But it makes best sense. It looks like we'll have greatest ridership if you take that actually down to Whittier Boulevard. So just south of the 60 freeway, Whittier Boulevard, there's a great amount of east-west traffic on Whittier Boulevard and bus lines. So in order to provide the best possible ridership numbers for that line, we're able to, we extended the limits so that we can give it the best capability to produce and be a viable alternative within that corridor. As you can see, the idea of it is the more of an express service. That's a 14-mile service this time. Peak headway 10 minutes, off peak at 20 minutes. You look at expedited rapid on and off systems. Those of you that are familiar with the Orange Line kind of know what we do with the Orange Line. So you try and facilitate some kind of system like that. This project, we've used the 60-foot big articulated buses. Now, Mark, I know, like a number of his things talk about, we're going to tell you all the secrets on 710, and that's really it. That's all the secrets there are on 710. And he told me I needed to fill 20 minutes. Well, I'm going to talk about my next project, because a lot of people couldn't believe that we would do this. The High Desert Corridor is another very important project here in Los Angeles County. And as we started developing that project, the project goes from the 14 of Palmdale Lancaster all the way to the 15 in Victorville, and the environmental document actually lays out through the town of Apple Valley, those of you that are familiar with Apple Valley, and goes out to the 18 freeway. The most viable piece of that, the biggest transportation corridor, is actually from 14 to 15. As we started developing that project, I was sitting in my office upstairs one day, probably shortly after David had come and talked to me about getting chargers downstairs. These guys from Western Wind Famers came in to see me. And Western Wind Famers is an energy company. They do big windmills, and that's how they produce energy. And they had heard that we were working on a project in the high desert to build a transportation corridor. And we were looking at it as a traditional highway project at the time, something, the Metropolitan Bypass. A lot of the truck traffic that we see in the basin of Los Angeles comes out of the Central Valley of California, comes down into the LA basin, cuts across our freeways near the foothills, hits the 15 freeway, and then goes out through the southern route to the rest of the United States of America. So the idea is to create a metropolitan bypass in the high desert so that that traffic doesn't have to come to the LA basin. You can save them 90 miles just coming in and out of the basin, but also allow them to traverse up out of this air basin and help keep those vehicles and their pollution out of our corridor. So it sounds like a good project to us. But the guys from Western Wind Famers came to me because they said the best remaining site to produce wind energy, untapped clean energy, within the state of California is the backside of the San Gabriel Mountains, just out that window. So they heard I had a corridor going. They haven't been able to do any projects in the area because they can't get to grid. There's no transmission line that gets their energy into the grid system. So they asked me to give them the power needs if we're going to build a project up there, a freeway project. They want to know what my power needs would be, because maybe they can develop a project and sell me energy. Now listen, I hadn't done that yet, so I told them about the project. And shortly after that, actually, I'm going to build on this a bit. Shortly after that, I was sitting with my staff, and again, I like to read the LA Times. It's a great newspaper, by the way. If you don't read the LA Times, it's a great newspaper. I was reading the LA Times, and they talked about this project called the Express West at the time. It's now, or Metro Express, now called Express West. It was a project to build a high-speed rail line from Las Vegas to Victorville. So the first thing I said is, Victorville. I know where that is. Where's Victorville? And I thought about it a bit. I said, Victorville, I know where Victorville is. High Desert Corridor. We go right by Victorville. It says, we go from Palmdale to Victorville. I said, Palmdale, California High-Speed Rail. California High-Speed Rail is building from Palmdale, right? Well, actually, they're going to build from San Francisco down into the Los Angeles basin. They're on track to do that. And the Express West is building from Las Vegas to Victorville. I wonder what would happen if we looked at throwing a high-speed rail line in the center of our freeway, and we could have high-speed rail connections, one-seat rides from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, from San Diego to Las Vegas, from the Bay Area to Las Vegas. What that might do for ridership on this project. So I got my staff together in the car, and we went out and we drove, because we wanted to see kind of where high-speed rail was going to cross. We got over here in Palmdale, and we drove the entire corridor, and there are some very large tumbleweeds in the area. I had, we passed one that was larger than our SUV. We were in kind of a little Toyota hybrid Highlanders. I thought it was a big car until I saw this tumbleweed come by. And I actually had to have the staff stop, because if I got caught in that, we'd be up against a fence post in Texas, someplace those two live in Texas and tumbleweed. But as we got into Victorville, I said, okay, so here's Victorville, that's where Victorville is. Here's where high-speed rail is going to come in. I looked over to my right, and there's this very large building, said Department of Water and Power on it, had these really huge cables coming in and out of it. So I asked my staff, is that an energy substation? And they says, I don't know. You know, so I says, well, go knock on the door, go ask them. DWP, large poles coming in and out. You know, one of the largest energy substations coming in the Los Angeles area passes right through our project as well. So not only do we have an opportunity now to develop this project, components include energy, freeway, expressway, toll road, high-speed rail feeder line service, green energy, bicycle, we have bicycle lane, there's the corridor, here's where I wanted to go. We have the ability to take what would be a traditional highway project just, good project, probably be okay. But by adding a high-speed rail element to it and a green energy corridor, not only can we generate green energy and bring it into the grid so it can come into Los Angeles, but we can generate enough energy within our right-of-way to provide cheap power so that high-speed rail becomes an exceedingly viable proposal. And we open up the high desert itself. There's a number of energy projects that have been proposed for the high desert corridor that are not being developed because they can't get to grid. They can't get to grid. Well, guess what? I go to grid. I can take that energy and we can open up the LA basin for the clean energy generation that we need in order to meet our quality needs. By looking a little outside of the box at our traditional projects, not only bringing in good alternatives, BRT, light rail, but in this case, adding to a traditional project, high-speed rail and clean energy, and being able to serve a much greater need within our basin. So that was my 20 minutes worth, and I'm going to take questions now, because I think I'm out of slides. Oh, I got one more. That's my stuff. Those of you that don't know me, that's my stuff. All right, so we're going to take a question here first, and then we'll go around the room.
Going back to your light rail and your bus rapid transit,
Yes.
where is the funding coming from?
We're still doing preliminary environmental and cost estimates. There is an element of Measure R that is available in the 710 corridor. There is $780 million that was identified as part of Measure R. In certain of the BRT, bus rapid transit scenarios, preliminarily that may be enough money to fund a BRT line. On the light rail line, we know that it's not enough to fund light rail. So that would have to be in the mix with all the other things you do for looking at projects. Actually, it's interesting because we found some success recently with doing light rail projects with public-private partnerships. So we are looking at a public-private partnership scenario for that light rail line. It's not a revenue generating. We're not proposing that it be like a toll facility or super high transit fares or anything like that. But there are ways that you can use public-private partnerships to bring in revenue. So we're beginning that exploration as well. So we don't have full funding for that identified yet, but it's certainly one of the things we have on the line.
I guess I should have asked first was, what is the estimated cost of each of these?
And we'll have those numbers out when we have the draft environmental document released. It's going to be coming out next spring. We're going through some refinements, particularly on the light rail line. So I don't want to get into numbers until we fully define the resale A. Are we going to be above ground, below ground, and some of the other impacts that we're looking at. So we'll have those when the draft environmental documents come out. Look for that in early spring of 2014.
Along with the P3.
All the alternatives and an analysis then on what a P3 might do. But don't, it's important to separate the concept of a delivery method, which is P3, from the concept of an environmental document and what a project might do at the end. P3 only becomes important if you're doing something like on highway projects where you introduce a toll. If you introduce a toll, there might be a diversion of traffic, so you have to adjust your traffic analysis. On a P3 for light rail transit, the way it's being done throughout the world right now, it's strictly an availability payment structure. So you use it to help finance and maybe bring the project in time to do it sooner. But it doesn't necessarily add funds or change the cash value of a fare. If you change the cash value of a fare, then it affects your ridership numbers, and that's what the environmental impact issues are. Okay, I'll take a question here, and then I'll go back.
Just really quickly about the Senator, can you clarify, the modeling right now is based on a single tunnel with no tolls. My understanding is that if the pace through the tunnel would be slow enough, then you'd have to go to a double tunnel with tolls. What is the metric that determines what single or double?
Yeah, actually, what we are looking at this point in time is 2 tunnels, 1 tunnel, toll, no toll. All those are things that we're factoring into the traffic analysis so that data can be there when the, pardon?
4 separate tracks? like that?
No, it's not for separate tracks, it's really variations of one track. The idea is a highway project, and sometimes you can do one really big tunnel, and you can go to two smaller tunnels, or you can do all those different things. It's really a function of the capacity at the end of the day. And sometimes if you're doing two smaller tunnels, you stage it so that you do one small tunnel first because that handles your traffic needs, and you set it up so that 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever that other date is, when your traffic increases, when it increases, then you build the second tunnel. So those are the variations that
You
are.
go back in and tunnel the second time?
Yeah, you can. Those are things that you look at now, you discuss during the environmental document, and then at the end of the day, you make a decision on what you're going to proceed with.
Is that not the most costly portion of the construction?
Is what not the most costly
The
portion?
tunnel.
It can be, yes, sometimes though, there's arguments that purchasing right away during surface routes in dense enough urban areas are as expensive. When you look at Wilshire Boulevard, for example, we're doing a light rail tunnel on, or we're doing a heavy rail tunnel on Wilshire Boulevard. Who's going to buy out Wilshire Boulevard, right? The land cost would far exceed the cost of doing the tunnel. So it really depends on the area you're in. Environmental documents, you look at the various alternatives, you evaluate costs, but really cost is a secondary consideration to environmental impacts as you're doing the environmental document process. Question in the back.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by this idea of doing the light rail transit or bus rapid transit instead of the 710 connecting up to the 210. And I guess what I'm trying to sort of understand a little more is, are you guys in looking at ridership estimates and sort of the overall usefulness of doing a light rail or bus rapid transit system there? Are you considering the impacts across the entire system so that if there are people taking taking this line, they're also going to be taking it? They're going to be taking other lines in the Metro Rail network or other bus lines, which would then also be taking people off the streets out of their cars. Alternatively, if you're adding freeway network, that's going to incentivize more people to use their cars and be on other parts of the freeway network as well. Is that the kind of thing that you're taking into consideration with that?
The alternatives, we're looking at all of the feeder lines that come into this area. So yes, as far as connectivity, what that might do to ridership, our focus of analysis at the end of the day is really what's happening in this corridor. The purpose and need of the environmental document talks about north-south travel, but you certainly look at what enhanced service coming in and out of the corridor may do to increase ridership through this corridor. At the end of the day, all of those are factors that you look at as you write an environmental document. All right, we got a lot of questions, so I'm going to come to Ms. Hirsch. I've known each other for a long time, then I'm going to pop back here and I'll come over here.
Mr. Fairley, is the right-of-way going to be any kind of an issue on any of your above-ground projects?
On our above-ground project, so I talked about two projects here. I talked about the high-density corridor,
Right.
and we talked about SR 710.
Right.
So in the tunnel alternative for the light rail tunnel on 710, we're proposing primarily a tunnel, again, from the Fillmore station, generally in a southerly direction towards Cal State LA. When you tunnel underneath existing people's property, you do have to acquire easements, right? So you have to acquire subsurface easements unless you're able to follow an existing street where you've already got a public right-of-way. So you're not necessarily taking right-of-way, although where you construct stations, quite often you have to acquire a couple of acres of land in order to be able to construct a station, especially when you've got an underground station. That will all be a part of the environmental document and what we disclose. And then further, as we go south, so you raise up out of the ground near Cal State LA, if you have a station there, we're anticipating being able to use either Cal State LA or Caltrans public right of way at that point. You cross the 10, you stay on the west side of the 710 there, so you're up against the county land where the detention center is and the freeway. You approach Corporate Center Drive, you go either underground again or stay above ground. As much as possible, we're following public right of way there, so you're trying to stay in the city streets. But again, when you have stations, you'll have to acquire land around the stations in order to construct the stations. The BRT, I'll get through all of them. The BRT alternative, we're working with the individual cities now. It works best. You can get the best ridership if you either restrict parking during peak periods so that you have a lane of its own, or you widen. So we're having those conversations with all the cities. We're not anticipating a lot of right-of-way acquisition with BRT, but there is some right-of-way acquisition that we're identifying. The high-density corridor, okay, is a brand new corridor. So that's all right-of-way acquisition, it's up in the desert. A number of landowners are actually very interested in that project going forward, but that would be full right-of-way acquisition for the width of the corridor.
It's not going to
Thank
be
you.
existing residential.
It's going near some. There's a little bit of impact, I think, in the Pondale piece in some commercial development. I don't recall anything in the residential area. They've actually, let's go back a little bit if I can. So in the high density corridor, you see these blue line variations. We're doing that a little bit because we're getting either closer to business development or residential development that we want to avoid. I'm not going to say there's no residential takes, particularly as we're adding now the element to add the high-speed rail connection. Because again, to do with the intersections, you've got to stop back away, you've got to have these big wide curves, and we're just finishing exploring that right now. So we'll know better in November when we do the alternative analysis with the impacts are. But for the most part, we're trying to avoid residential impacts and as much as you can existing business impacts. All right, I had a question back here, and then I'm going to come to this side.
Totally different subject.
Yes.
I have been trying to find the EIR or the EIS for the Green Line, for rail in the freeway.
The original one?
Yeah, for decades. I've never been able to find it, and I've talked to other people, including the MTA librarian, who have never been able to find it. So, do you know if there was one?
Yeah. Well, I'm comfortable there was one. A significant portion of that was cleared within the same environmental document that cleared the Century Freeway project. So if you look,
There's a busway in there, but no rail.
yeah, well, okay, so that began with the footprint, right? First thing really the environmental document process is to describe the impacts to the environment and the footprint that would have existed. And things are a lot more detailed today than they would have been. That was probably late 80s, early 90s when that environmental document would have been written.
And then there was a judge who had some role in it as well.
Let me finish. There may have been a supplemental environmental document which is small in nature and would have attached to it that would have described the concept of changing from a busway to a rail line itself. The state clearinghouse, there's a state clearinghouse for environmental documents. If you check there and you've checked with Matt, unless you personally know Ron Kaczynski, and he's got, I don't think he has old files from that old, but unless you know Ron Kaczynski well, and he's got a drawer that he could open up and point it to you, I got no other sources for you to go to.
I'm relying mainly on Matt. I've looked myself, but he's done a lot more.
Yeah. Okay, well, Matt's good. I mean, Matt is good. If Matt can't find it, it might not exist. All right, I was going to come here, and then I'll take both of them, 1 and 2, and then we have some other questions. Jan?
Yeah, I'm not much of a finance kind of person.
Okay.
But I understand obvious incentives for private partners on a toll roadway or roadway project. I don't, from what you just said, I don't understand the incentive for a private partner on a transit.
It is different, and some transit properties are actually looking at a full public-private partnership where the private side comes in, they build it, they set their own fare rates, and they run a structure. The Pacific Electric Line was really built and operated that way for a long time here in California. That's how that one was built originally. You know, public-private partnership, the way they're being looked at nowadays, really the incentive for the private side is they come in to design and build it. They can find the most efficient way to set it up so that they can structure it. Sometimes you add in operations and maintenance. Most of the times here in LA, we're not looking at operations and maintenance. We want to keep the fare the same and use the same fare structure as we're using on all our other systems. So really, it revolves around an availability payment type of structure and financing, both the debt and equity piece of it. It's one of those things where there's a bond buyers conference tomorrow at LA Live. Yes, yeah. And there's whole weeks and days you can spend on that subject itself. It's not one where they're looking at collecting revenues through like a toll structure. No, it's not a toll structure at all. It's an availability payment structure. We on the public side, at LA Metro, we collect about 23 cents of our operating expenses out of the fare box today. We would like to get to 30%. So on the private side, even where you do get someone to take over using full maintenance and operations, the public side pays them a stipend for that. Is how that works in those that are doing it. We're going to take one order.
I just wonder if you could explain what availability payment-based structure is?
Sure, an availability payments. Okay, sure. I'll cover it real quick. An availability payment structure is one where you pay the concessionaire once a facility is available. And they did one of the roads down in Florida like this just recently. So the concessionaire, they designed, they built the structure, they got not a penny until the facility was open, and then there's an agreed upon payment structure to them over a period of time, 35, 50 years, whatever the time frame is, that they use then to recoup their costs. When you put operations and maintenance in that as well, if, let's say, they have a system failure and the system doesn't operate, there actually is a deduct for that period of time where the system is not available for use by the public. So that's kind of how that works. Right, Joanne had the next question.
On the 710 LRT you're proposing, why is it not all of the tunnel? Why is the elevated portion in East LA?
Yeah, your question for those you couldn't hear is why is it elevated in East Los Angeles? Part of the problem that you've got is in order to make the service work really well, you want to serve Cal State LA. Those of you that know the geography there, Cal State LA is up at the top of the hills. So you've got to climb after you cross out underneath Valley Boulevard to have a station that's reasonable for Cal State LA. Geographically, you're just chasing downhill all the way there from that point to get down to Route 60. So you're going downhill. There's a certain rate that you can go and operate effectively. One of the things that staff looked at originally is in that side of town, there are some streets that are wider. So if they have the ability to put the light rail elevated, but in the median of a street, it has much less of a footprint impact, and construction has much less of an impact on the area than it would be of doing a tunnel and taking land to build stations around that. But we are also looking at a tunnel in East Los Angeles as well. Both of those are things that are being looked at. So, but if we can have less of an impact going above ground, then we want to have less of an impact, at least discuss that with the public.
Well, but recently I was at a presentation a couple of months ago, and they were at some community group down there, and they were very concerned about the negative impacts of the elevated line in their community.
Correct. We've heard that from several people. That's why there's an underground alternative as well. So we'll make sure they understand both. All right. Yes, question over here.
First of all, an apology because I've only been in the state for a month, so there's an awful lot of the territory around here I'm not familiar with.
Okay.
But from the sound of it, it sounds like the high desert corridor doesn't have very much development there. But if you bring in the highway and the high-speed rail corridor, are you also making provisions for the possibility that you may want commuter rail service there if that area develops in the future, or is it in such an area that development is just highly unlikely?
Yeah, answer B. The high desert corridor is mostly Joshua trees and sagebrush and very large tumbleweed going through. You have a couple of nodes that have developed. You have Victorville is a very active, the Victorville Apple Valley area is a very active and growing node along the 15 freeway in the high desert. Lancaster are traditional cities in the LA basin, but there's not a lot of development in the long-term projections in that area, or not for a lot of development outside of those few little centralized areas. So the idea of transport between them is not really conducive for something like rail. It's just a 55 miles. Right, so you've got one node here and another node 55 miles away. Doesn't make a lot of sense. High-speed rail may better serve than other types of transportation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll take the question over here.
I am unaware of any recent public-private partnership that has been successful in the state. Can you enlighten me?
Sure, Route 91. Route 91 is an exceedingly successful public-private partnership in the state of California. At the end of the day, actually Long Beach Courthouse is a very successful public-private partnership.
Where's Route 91 again?
Route 91 is a toll lane that exists on Route 91 freeway. It's in Orange County, and it goes out to the Riverside County line. Riverside County has asked for permission to extend that tollway, so we'll go into the county of Riverside now. That's making like $2-3 million a year. That is going to OCTA, and OCTA is reinvesting that in other projects in that corridor. So that's a very successful one. There's a number on the East Coast. California hasn't.
I'm aware of two in Orange County that they hired Neil Peterson to try to hold the lid on for a while, and they're falling apart.
Yeah,
and the local jurisdiction takes over the debt, right?
No, they don't have to. No, they don't have to. In the case of 91, OCTA bought out that project, but OCTA bought that out and is making a huge profit. The public isn't required to take over any debt if you structure your public-private partnership correctly. You do have to structure it correctly. We're not proposing types of things here where, an availability payment structure for the light rail line. That's one where we're actually guaranteeing the debt, and actually we're just paying for the full project. We're using a public-private partnership as a delivery method versus design-build or design-bid-build. And then they bring finance to the board. But on toll facilities, 91's highly successful. We're waiting to see what happens with the Presidio Parkway project up in the Bay Area. That's one that's a public-private partnership that is just starting right now. It's gone through commercial close, so it's too soon to tell where that one's going to be. Long Beach Courthouse just opened up, so there are a number of successful projects. If you probably Google public-private partnerships, you can find a website that will list all the ones that are there. They're done most in Canada. In fact, most of these projects are done that way.
Most what?
Most of the big projects are done using public-private partnerships.
I'm only aware of two in Orange County, and they both come up as they're almost in receivership. Tell me why I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, well, we could probably have a big conversation on that, but today's subject is transit, so you might want to talk to me separately about that. In both cases, the projects in Orange County, I know that the road's there, and it didn't cost the public anything to get those roads. So if he ends up in receivership, the public still has the road and we don't have to pay for it. That's the success in many people's minds. Same thing happened in 125 in Detroit. In San Diego, a lot of people are pointing to that as a failure. 125 in San Diego area.
So that wouldn't be an inducement for the private person to come in and really jack up their rates?
Yeah, if they do, then I just don't buy them. We don't have to buy from them. You know, you do an analysis of what a project should cost, and if someone comes in and they're going to cost too much, they're going to cost too much. You just don't buy from them.
Okay, I'll share.
Yeah, it's all about competition. And Russ?
Obviously, the expansion of the carpool lanes through the 405 is sort of the last gasp of getting traffic through there.
Right.
So you really have to be out of the box to continue those north-south connections, especially from the valley, the west side of the valley down to LAX. Doesn't that just require tunnels as the only way that you're going to be able to get that capacity and work through?
The Sepulveda Pass is kind of a unique area. It really is, and it's one of those that's my favorite when you get people like from Washington, D.C. and who don't understand Sepulveda Pass. We talk about it reverently, we curse it, we do all sorts of things here. But when you get up in the area and you take a look at it, you realize that you've got this huge area, the San Fernando Valley, great population base sitting there. And then immediately south of it, you've got the whole west side of LA leading down into LAX. But from right on top of there, you look left and right all the way to downtown LA, you've got nothing but mountains and darkness, and towards Santa Monica North, you've got nothing but mountains and darkness all the way up towards Ventura County. So it's very clear the importance of Sepulveda Pass. The Sepulveda Pass Freeway, I've said this for many, many years now, the Sepulveda Pass Freeway, when this project done, is at the maximum practical width for a freeway. 12 lanes, 6 in each direction is the maximum practical width for a freeway. That's what they taught us back in college. That's what we did the math on. Last time I checked, it was still the maximum practical width. And when they're done widening there, they're going to have 12 lanes on Sepulveda Pass on the freeway. So if you're going to add capacity in that corridor, you're going up or you're going down. They are looking out at Ms. Nurse. I know you have a question, so we'll get there next. We have a project in our long-range transportation plan, and as a part of Measure R, called the Sepulveda Pass Transit Corridor. It's about $1 billion. The money's all in the third decade. So that's one where we're actually exploring a public-private partnership because of the area, 2 million people in the San Fernando Valley, 3-4 million people on the west side. No one seems to work near each other. They all seem to take that pass every day and go back and forth to work. It's the most heavily traveled corridor, certainly in California and probably in the United States of America. So we are going to look at a possible public-private partnership for a transit line, maybe in conjunction with highway toll roads to help pay for it, and looking at a tunnel project through that corridor. That's one that we have been tasked to explore by our board. It's not the subject of today's briefing, but it's one that we hope to have information next spring on whether that should be pursued or not pursued. So we'll go to Ms. Hurst next.
Since 405 is one of my favorite subjects, was there a provision at the time that they were doing all of this work, Mr. Bailey, to allow for, you can't really go up unless you're going right under those overpasses or bridges, or you're going to tunnel. So when you say the Sepulveda Pass, I'd like to believe that you're referring to the 405 and not Sepulveda Boulevard.
Yes, ma'am, we are.
Okay.
Yeah, we are. If you go up, we're talking about the 405 freeway.
Right.
When that freeway widening that is today under construction was designed, one of the original planning efforts looked at in the environmental document, a lot of you may remember there was discussion of a high-speed rail line or a light rail line from LAX up into the San Fernando Valley, maybe towards Van Nuys Airport. We recognized there was not sufficient width for it to be at grade, so we took a look at a number of those structures and the width of the median to make sure there was room to get a column in, so if they did want to go up, they could go up in the middle of the freeway. Mulholland Bridge is high enough, they can go over the freeway and under the Mulholland Bridge.
So was a provision made for that width to do what you were speaking of?
Yes, ma'am. That was all looked at so that would be possible. In addition, I think a lot of people recognize that's a very steep grade going up the hill. Yeah, so it may well make more sense to go underground when we do that, but fortunately someone else other than I will be studying that one. That one's on there.
And me.
Yeah.
And the other thing, the part of all of this is, I am asked to look at environmental documents from different cities because I had such great success with the 405, which means zero success.
I think you made changes, but that's okay.
The first thing that I always look for is, if I wanted to go, and I'm just going to use an example, say I lived at the corner of Coldwater Canyon and Sunset,
Okay.
and I want to go downtown, and I now know that there's a new system that's going to go from Westwood or the VA to get me either downtown or to the beach.
Yep.
So I get in my car and I go to there. I ask and I look in these documents, and there's no place to park your car to go from A to B to get on these public transportation projects. Now in Connecticut or New York, if I want to go to Greenwich, I hop the train at Penn Station, Grand Central, get there, train stop, 500 cars are out there, the ladies with their husbands are picking them up. I mean, it's civilized. Here, when I read these documents, and I'm looking at these things, and are we in the dark ages that we're not, I mean, even the hint of building something should be the immediate acquisition of the land. The worst thing that can happen is you're land rich and you sell it to DWP later on. But it's like there's no parking at any of these facilities. I mean, maybe Century City will have something, but when you're going up to the VA, are you going to park in the VA? how do I get from my house at Coldwater Canyon and Sunset to any of these public transportations? I grew up on public transportation.
Good.
I'm a big city girl, and I moved down here in the 50s, and all I saw was a bus going down Wilshire Boulevard every 45 minutes.
That's all that goes down there now, although.
But the tragedy is that at some point not long ago, there was a move to try to have dedicated bus lanes.
Yes.
As they do in, say, New York on Fifth Avenue goes down.
Yep. And
You get in that
remember reading
lane,
about
you
that,
are
right?
taking your life in your hands to get in that lane and park your car. I mean, you're toast. So the buses go every 7 minutes down that street, full of people. They know that that's a dedicated bus lane. Yet there doesn't appear to be, and I'm just reaching, any political will to say, we're going to try and do dedicated bus lanes for 1 year on Wilshire, or 1 year on Olympic, or 1 year on Pico.
I remember when they tried it on Pico, and it was an awful mess. Now, I'm not gonna begin to address
No,
political will
I mean,
today.
it's a
You know,
hard
I'm a
to bring-
technician,
but
I can
how
tell
do
you
bring
this
a
work.
city, you know, when you're doing all these concrete
Yeah.
construction jobs, and the simplest things is to get people out of their car.
Right.
And we're forcing people back into their car to try to figure out how to take this rapid transit, how to take this bullet train, how to take these things, and there's no provision to get from A to B.
And hopefully the political will come about when we're desperate enough, and I hope it doesn't take till we're desperate enough.
Well, or dead.
Yeah, either one would be too long for me.
Thank you.
So I'm really interested in this high district corridor piece and the connectivity between Express West and
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
and
that's
the
a
California
great
High-Speed
thing.
Rail.
Yeah.
However, Express West seems to be kind of
Does it? I don't think
flagging
it
a
is.
bit. I don't know.
Yeah, okay, let's talk about Express West. So
Okay.
Express West was a proposed privately financed high-speed rail line. Some of the consultants are smiling because they know more about it probably in the room than I do about it. But one of the big guys in Las Vegas was looking at developing high-speed rail, and he wanted to get high-speed rail actually into the Los Angeles basin. He took a look at the 15 corridor, couldn't figure out how to get through there, it's just too complicated. He did a business case analysis that said if he's in Victorville, it's easy enough to get from San Diego, LA, Orange County, whatever, to Victorville. They have large parking lots in Victorville right next to the mall.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And that you could, and that enough people will do that for it to pay. He is using mostly private financing to do all the work that's been done to date. But in order to construct the rest of the facility, he has proposed a large federal loan guarantee, not a large federal loan, but a large federal loan guarantee. And his business case actually more than supported that federal loan guarantee. It gives him access to cheap money is really what it does. So at a lower interest rate, he can make a viable alternative out of it. He did a kind of as a business case that was reviewed by 4 or 5 different firms. Everybody looked at it, and everyone says this is a good business case.
So
So let me go on. So what happened recently is you read where the Express West is dead and it's not going to go ahead because they denied him his federal loan guarantee, FRA loan guarantee. Yes, they denied him the federal loan guarantee. They did it based upon his inability to meet Buy America compliance, which is a part of the new T21 laws, not based on his business case. So we are talking with him. We are talking with the Federal Railroad Administration. That consortium is working to find ways to resolve their Buy America compliance issue so that they can proceed with their project. California High-Speed Rail, for example, is having issues as well. A lot of you that are following that project have read some of the issues recently on California High-Speed Rail. We're wishing them good luck in moving it. It is something that we need here in California. They have written a business case that's not nearly as well documented, by the way, as the Express West one was, but they've written a good business case. So my project, high-speed rail, only makes sense if I've got both ends, right? For me to go from Palmdale to Victorville by myself makes no sense. There's just not going to be the ridership there on either one of those. If I can interline so that you can get a one-seat ride with the Express West guys, if I can interline so that you have a one-seat ride with California High-Speed Rail, you have a viable system. I think that was your question at the end of the day?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, to add to that,
Yes.
Senator Harry Reid,
Yes.
who is the backer of the Desert Express, from the beginning that is, today announced or recently announced that he's talking with fellow politicians in Washington DC to jumpstart this again. So it's not dead, it's just stalled.
No, it is not dead, I guarantee you it's
Yeah.
not dead. It is stalled based on,
Buy
using
America.
Buy America.
Which
but-
they said, they wanted to use Fly the Air, which is out of Montreal, Canada.
Right.
That's the train set.
Yeah,
And so that's the Buy America clause.
David would know. And so, it is not, we're continuing to talk to the Express West guys. We're continuing to talk to the California high-speed rail guys. They're very interested, by the way, even if we just develop the energy corridor and nothing else happens, because they certainly are looking at the amount of energy that they're gonna have to use. So being able to have them access to clean, cheap energy is also an interest to them. So, but I'm not gonna do, if both ends aren't there, it doesn't make sense. If Express West doesn't go from Victorville to Vegas, I don't need to bid to Victorville. If California high-speed rail doesn't go from Palmdale into the LA Basin, I don't need to bid. All makes sense. All right, I had a question. I saw a hand up and he put it down because I was talking too long. Where was my question at?
I have a question.
Okay, I'll take him and then I'll come to David. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, please.
Get back to the 710.
Yes.
You're planning on expanding the southern half, the I-710 to 10 lanes, 4 lanes for trucks, 6 lanes.
Yeah, it's a different project than today, but that ends down south of I-5. And
Right.
actually, we're revisiting that.
But,
We may not have the freeway widening at all.
okay,
Yeah, we're doing the draft environmental document on that as well, so we received some public input, and the need to actually do that widening north of, say, 405 may not exist, so we'll be reevaluating
my
that.
question though was going to be, why aren't you studying the effect of trucks from the ports on the 710 tunnels themselves,
You mean further north?
further north?
Yeah, and okay, actually, good question. The question really is, what's the impact of trucks and truck traffic, maybe even port-generated truck traffic on a potential 710 corridor, whether it's a gap closure or not. So yes, we're using, SCAG has just recently finished updating all of their truck models based upon some better O&D studies. So both 710, the south piece, and 710 north will be using the latest models from the SCAG region that looks at what trucks are in the corridor. And we'll look at whether it's port-related trucks or non-port-related trucks. It looks at the entirety of trucks within the corridor. And one of the things that we're looking at, because this issue has come up in the corridor, a lot of you know that, is there's a concern that these port-related trucks are just going to run up the 710 and they're going to come out of the 210 and go through communities up and down the 210 freeway. I remember back in whatever it was, the 90s or something, the last time somebody did an environmental document on this, one of the things that was being evaluated was prohibiting trucks on that stretch of 710 north of the 10 freeway. So that is something that we'll be looking at as part of this environmental document as well, is if you eliminate trucks from this corridor, what impact does that have? So that's one of the model runs. That's not me, I hope. All right, and then I've got a question back here, and then we'll come around. So I've got a question back here, and then we'll come over to you. Okay.
So, when on the light rail transit,
Yes.
the aerial segment is 3 miles long, and the tunnel segment is 4.5 miles.
Yes.
And then it also says total length 7.6. So is that tunnel segment 7.6 miles total, or is that? It's kind
Give me
of
the numbers
confusing,
again.
that's the overall.
The guy sitting next to you did that.
The total length of the LRT 7.6,
Okay,
or is
and
that just for the tunnel?
that's the total length, yeah, let's talk about that a bit. The total length is 7.6 miles. There's a proposed tunnel piece of it from Fillmore Station at least to past Valley Boulevard. And then the numbers you're looking at assume that it goes, there's a short stretch of that grade, and then it goes above grade all the way down to about the gold line here, Route 60 in East Los Angeles. So that's your total length. Now, one of the alternatives that we're looking at, you still have to climb, you have to come above grade, you have to service Cal State Los Angeles, it's a major point. But then we're also looking at, can we go below grade again to service the East LA side of things. So the piece that's tunnel may actually grow longer, and the piece that's above grade may grow shorter at the end of the day. But that's assuming that at just south of Valley Boulevard, you make that grade point, you make that grade
Okay,
shift.
so then is that station at just the ends
No.
of this line, or would there be stations in between? If there is, where are they?
There's 7 stations proposed, if I recall. I know Cal State LA is a major station. I don't remember the others off the top of my head, but we've been doing some presentations and that data is out there, so we can get that for you, David. Yeah, you remember?
Yeah, stations, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
I think it's a Mednick and Third
Yes.
Street, Floral, Castle LA, Alhambra, which is the county
Yeah.
building, Huntington, South Pasadena.
Okay. I know there's one, for instance, in the vicinity of East Los Angeles City College, because you want to be able to provide access in East Los Angeles City College. So there's 7 stations along the corridor, and it's on the project website. So if you go to www.metro.net and go into projects, you'll be able to download all the information you want on that level of detail.
So one last question.
Okay.
Whose idea was it?
Oh, no, it was his idea, no. He got
710 North, freeway to Pasadena, when it never goes to Pasadena. It ends at that.
Why is it called the Pasadena Freeway?
Yeah.
When- since it
No, I
doesn't
mean,
run Pasadena?
the signs all say 710 Pasadena.
I think we took some of them off. Wow.
Oh, I don't know.
God, that was, I didn't have a driver's license when I got that. We did change, I know that some of them were changed, and they took Pasadena off and some of them, but they didn't catch them all. Send a letter to Caltrans, they should fix that. I've got a question over here. Yes.
Okay, I'm fascinated by the public-private partnership.
I can tell.
You haven't seen anything yet. You've got a $5 billion project there. You've got a $5 billion project in Pasadena. And it's all going to be covered by public-private partnership with a little bit of change from Measure R. Now, and you're saying we can walk.
If I said that, I'm wrong.
No, you said we can walk if we don't get the right terms. Now, if you walk,
yes.
if you walk, you're saying, what do? Dig for a quarter mile? Or you just say the hell with it?
Yeah, well, yeah, if I don't get a viable alternative back, I just walk from the deal and I find another way to procure it.
Where do you find $10 billion?
Oh, you don't. You don't find $10 billion, so that keeps me at the table, doesn't it? So this is a serious question. This is a serious question.
It's a very serious
question. This is a very serious question.
You don't have the money.
And you have to look at what we're doing nowadays and what our economy is, right? Gas tax is not going to be raised. You're not going to see an increase in the gas tax. It is really not a viable alternative for funding transportation.
I have to
I'll get there. The last 3 people that talked about alternative methods of raising taxes for transportation, one of the most talked about one was the VMT, Vehicle Miles Travel Tax. I remember her well. She was a friend of mine. I've known her for years. She was hired as the head of DMV on Friday. She talked about VMT in a speech she gave on Saturday, and she was fired on Monday. So nobody is talking seriously about a vehicle miles travel tax. So looking at things like public-private partnerships that can bring in tolls is one of the methods that we're talking about. But if it's not a good deal, it's not a good deal. If it doesn't make business sense, you don't just do the deal when it doesn't make business sense. But we do have to, one more thing and then I'll go to you. I'm going to pontificate for a second. We, as America, as a country, stopped investing in infrastructure years ago. And that's across the board. That's transit, that's highways, that's highway maintenance, that's bridge maintenance, that's pipelines, that's bicycle lanes, that's everything. We stopped investing in infrastructure of all types many, many years ago. Our energy infrastructure in many areas is on the verge of collapse. We as a country, if we wish to maintain a position of relevance, need to understand the difference between an expenditure and an investment. And many times, infrastructure, whatever that form of infrastructure is an investment. Schools for kids, all those things, that's an investment. It's an investment that should pay off in the future. But it still should be driven by a business case. Each individual deal, if at the end of the day it doesn't make sense, you shouldn't get into that deal.
Okay, I've been to probably 10 presentations by your staff, and I think you were sort of peripherally involved in one or two of them. I have never heard anybody say, maybe it's a no-go.
Oh, okay, maybe it's
And
another.
you're saying that for public consumption right now.
Yeah, well, I've been at others where others of us have talked, and they've said that, although they may not have said it as forcefully as I just did. At the end of the day, if it doesn't make sense, please don't do it.
Right, that's what.
Okay, if that's your point. that's a
Second
good
point.
Yeah.
I used to worry about trucks,
Yes.
and I remember there's federal legislation which, according to the trucking industry, denies you the right to say no trucks on anything with a federal dollar in it.
Well, that's
Is that gone now?
No, it's not gone. It's never gone. You always have the ability to create exceptions and ban trucks from routes. You have to have a reason for doing it. We have that in this state, in this county, if I recall correctly, about 5 or 6 years ago, we banned trucks from a major portion of Route 2. The piece up in the mountains, we're having problems with guys losing their brakes and running down and walking out Flint Ridge and hitting things, bookstores amongst other things. So we have the ability to ban trucks. Generally, you have to have a reason for doing it.
It was called blood on concrete.
But in this case, you're looking at it as a portion of the environmental document, and it's a potential impact. There's a potential mitigation for environmental impacts that are caused by the project. So it's an open discussion point.
So you're saying you can stop trucks anywhere you want along a federally financed, partially, freeway, and it's okay?
No, I wasn't that as direct. Yeah, I says there's a lot of caveats and a lot of work that goes into it. You have to have a way for commerce to happen. Right, in this case, they can do what they do today. They go to the 10, they take the 10 over to the 605,
Go up to the 10.
I mean, they have routes that go around it, so I mean, we're not cutting off the ability for commerce to happen. In the case of Route 2, there was a demonstrated safety reason, right? So you have to have a reason. You can't just say, I want to cut off trucks, so I'm going to cut off trucks. You have to have a reason, you have to demonstrate the reason, you have to have public hearings, you have to take public input. So there's ways that you can do it, but you really should have a reason. Trucks are important, they bring goods.
Oh, no.
Right, that's where we build our grocery
I
stores.
just remember it as a very firm. Now, one add-on to that. Did the Supreme Court knock out a lot of the truck regulations in the LA Harbor?
I think you're talking about the green port stuff.
Yes.
And the Port of LA, and we're way off topic, by the way. If you're having fun, as long as you're having fun, I'll talk about this stuff. When I get too far off topic, just tell me, because I'm enjoying the conversation. There's two different approaches. The Port of LA and the Port of Long Beach. In the Port of Long Beach, they have a much more open structure in that they said as long as you meet certain requirements, you can do business within our port. We have clean regulations. The Port of LA went to a much more restricted thing. You had to be a part of a consortium. You had to be, you had all these rules in place. And you had to be part of like a pre-approved group of trucks, or you weren't allowed in. I believe what was ruled against was the more stricter controlling requirements within the Port of Los Angeles. It's the method that they chose. It's not the goal of clean trucks that they struck down. It was that they had a very prescriptive method that they found flawed. It's not an area I follow as close. Well, I do follow it actually quite closely, but I don't get into the great details there. So I was following that enough to know that it was the method that they prescribed that was struck down.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I have a question back here, and then I'll come up. Yes, Justin, the gentleman in the back.
One thing nagging me ever since I saw the light roll standard for the 710.
Yes.
Was is there like a general limit for the ridership?
Limit? Let me see, I'd have to think about it. Maximum headway is usually 5 minutes a train. Generally speaking, I know we're trying to get faster in a few areas, but most of the trains we're running are 5 minutes. We've got 3-car trains, they're usually based on the length of the platform. We get about 60 persons a car. You're in a field that's not mine, so I think we can get 180, let's say 240 people crush load per train, 5 minutes per day, all day long. Somebody do the math, that's probably your maximum ridership.
I mean, like the,
Yeah.
like the
40
predicted.
times, yeah.
3,000 an hour.
3,000 an hour times 24 hours a day, so you're at 72,000.
What's the projected?
No, I mean like the predicted ridership.
Oh, that would be in the draft environmental document. We'll bring that out. We're still doing the analysis on that. So when the draft environmental document comes out, early next spring, late next winter is better, you'll get the late next spring. Early next spring, I mean,
As this now
we'll
is
have the
going to be
numbers.
very expensive to build it, plus all these grade separations, and I'm not sure if the cost would be justified considering that the goal line ridership.
Yeah, that's a decision for next year. Right now, it's important that we put it forward, that we do everything we can to maximize the ridership potential within that corridor. Certainly, cost benefit is a decision, but really under CEQA and NEPA, cost is not really a consideration. It's the environmental impact that's a consideration. You temper that in the decision-making process of going forward with a cost benefit. So, you don't have to build anything just no matter what the cost is to solve a problem. You're looking for ways of addressing the greatest thing possible at hopefully a reasonable cost to do so. So those are really separate considerations.
One more thing, how are they, has it been looked at how they're planning to tie it into the metro rail system? Is it going to be?
Yeah, there'll be a vertical station at Fillmore and as well at the East LA side, at that station over there. So elevators, escalators up and down between the existing Gold Line at Fillmore Station and then the station on the Gold Line in East Los Angeles.
No, but I mean like in terms of, is it going to be separately run like with its own maintenance or?
Yes.
Is it going
Yes,
to be
yes, it is a separate line. Actually, great questions and shows a great level of detail. Thank you. Because it is a separately lined and it doesn't interline, so you can't run these trains on other lines, it would have to have its own maintenance yard.
Okay.
Yes, but you could do dispatch from a centralized dispatch station, so you don't have to build a separate dispatch center for it. You can do that through the main rail dispatch center, but you do have to have its own operations and its own maintenance yard.
All right, thank you.
Yes. Question here and then we'll.
Coming from the 210 corridor, living in the 210 corridor, since I think it was 2002 when the 210 gap to 15 out that way.
Yeah, in San Bernardino. Yes.
We've all seen the effect of that in terms of not only car traffic, but diesel truck traffic. And I'm wondering, then there was a study in 2011, an origin and destination study of truck traffic on the 210. Unigar did that. Do you know if those data went into the model updates that you've talked about? Because they certainly, the truck drivers and companies interviewed, certainly substantiate the increased use of the 210 as an alternate to the 60 and the 10. And, you talk about people getting the wisdom around it, they're all scared about the port traffic. I'm not scared about port traffic, what's defined as port traffic, containers on flatbeds, coming up to my area. I'm concerned more about the increased use of the 210 by any piece of traffic.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I'm wondering if that study, which was, pretty powerful, went into the modeling updates.
Yeah, certainly that information was made available to SCAG. If you would,
That's not.
I'm giving you an honest answer with everything that I know, and I'm not telling you what I don't know, and I'm not going to lie to you.
No, I get it.
Okay. All right, so that information was made available to SCAG. How that factored in with all the other information that they use when you build a model that's region-wide, you have to talk to SCAG and their modelers about.
So you're not confident that it was actually?
No, I'm not confident that it wasn't either. I know it was provided to them, and I know that they use generally all the data points you have when you build a model. Whether that was an overwhelming piece of data compared to other data sets that they had is what I don't know. That's a SCAG question. Yeah, Russ.
On the 710 rail project, where it is, could it theoretically continue down to all the other lines and end up being a basin north-south corridor that could really start connecting the east San Gabriel Valley to a lot of things north and south?
Why, yes, it could, Russ. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's partly why we have it designed the way it is, so that it has the potential to do that, should it become something that works within the region overall. Okay, yes, go ahead. Chris.
If on the
high desert corridor or on the 710 public-private partnerships under this, you said the funds availability structure or?
Yeah, an availability payment structure.
Would you need new legislation from Sacramento to be able to do any of those mechanisms if Caltrans or the MTA is giving a long-term guarantee to somebody?
There is existing law in California, and there's actually one of the first laws in the United States to allow public-private partnerships was in California. It was under that law that the FERC 91 was built originally. And there's been a couple of different laws since then, but there's currently legislation in California, SB4X, Cogsdale bill. It gives the ability to enter into public-private partnerships in the state of California through the year 2017, actually at the end of December 2016. So there's a process that you go through that involves approval through the California Transportation Commission. There's an advisory role created by another group called the PIAC, the Private Infrastructure Advisory Committee. I think the P was private, it could have been public though. The PIAC, it's something Infrastructure Advisory Committee. That committee it's advisory in nature, but it existed quite strongly in the previous administration. It's not been reactivated under the Brown administration. There's also an advisory role that the legislature plays within the process that they've defined under that.
Is it like the design build where there's some kind of a numerical limit on the number of projects?
No, actually, in the discussion of different laws that some of you know more about than any of the rest of us do. At the same time, they passed law that allowed design build to be used more thoroughly in the state of California. That law on design build created 10 slots using a variety of different methods. So certain methods you had to use like 4 or 5 and different ways of doing it. And that bill is actually due to expire at the end of this calendar year, January 2013. There is a bill that's on the governor's desk, passed by the legislature, AB 401. That's a design build bill. That bill provides unlimited opportunities to do design build in the state of California through the year 2024. But again, there's a process in place for making sure that someone independent of those proposing the project can look at the business case and make sure there's a business case determination. So I'll take a question here.
I hate to drag us down with a super simple question, but I find myself wondering why anybody would want to work under the availability payment structure. You do the work,
yeah,
all of it, we'll take it done when you're done.
Yeah.
Oh, and we're government back.
Yeah.
Our money is government back.
Yeah.
Who's going to take that deal? Maybe
Yeah, actually, you'd be surprised. Most public-private partnerships done throughout the world are actually that kind of a structure. It is the most common structure of a public-private partnership that exists. Very few of them are actually full concession type of projects where a concessionaire takes on a revenue risk in a total scenario. So that's actually more of a specialized case, although generally most people don't think of it that way. So the Long Beach Courthouse, for example, is an availability payment structure. The City of Parkway project in the Bay Area is an availability payment structure. So it is a much more common method now as public financing becomes more scarce. Perhaps it won't be, but it is a very common method, and they evaluate the agency of putting forward the backing of it like they would anyone else. They look at the Moody's, the Dun & Bradstreet, for the companies that are involved. They look at the Moody's rating, the Fitch and Poor's rating for the agency. They look at the type of money you're doing, and they do a financial analysis as to whether this is something that makes sense for them or doesn't make sense. And then they add that to the other risk factors that are in project development, and companies make decisions to yes, go ahead and pursue projects, or not go ahead and pursue projects based upon the risks that each individual project puts forward. But there are companies that do nothing but this. This is their whole career path, and this is how they stay in business.
Hasn't the CTC and Caltrans come out recently with a new 5-year fund estimate that shows there's actually going to be an 8% decline in Caltrans transit money over the next 5 years?
There has been a recent release of a new fund estimate from the California Transportation Commission prepared by Caltrans. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, so I don't know what the bottom line numbers are. I know that we have people on 23rd floor in our capital programming that are looking at it. And there is an allocation that's proposed that would be available for us in Los Angeles County. It's strictly a straight formula-based calculation of the amount of funds that are available here. But if it's a decrease of 8%, I don't know that. I do know that vehicle miles traveled has stayed steady in California. Actually, it's grown slightly, but fuel efficiency in our vehicles have increased even more rapidly, so they're getting fewer gas tax dollars in, straight excise tax per miles traveled. So I wouldn't be surprised to hear that there's a decrease, but I haven't seen the numbers.
Isn't Caltrans providing some money to some of the transit projects, and isn't MTA involved in the STIP project right now? There's going to be a STIP review, and the STIP is submitted to MTA for your input on what you want built or funded in LA County.
Yeah.
And that's coming up next year or late this year?
Yeah, we can, well,
including
okay,
transit.
let's talk about transportation funding
Yeah.
for the moment. We get money from several different things. There's weight fees on vehicles. When you lose your vehicle license, there's fees. Those all come in to help fund transportation, whether it's the DMV or California Highway Patrol or transportation agencies like Caltrans. There's an excise tax on gasoline, so you pay a certain amount per gallon. No matter how much the price is, you pay a certain amount per gallon. Some of it goes to the federal government. They take it back to Washington, D.C. They mix it out amongst the states. We get back about 91 cents for every dollar we send in California. Then there's a certain amount that goes to Sacramento. Most of that existing excise tax, whatever that is, all gets absorbed into operations and maintenance, the shop. That's trying to do the best you can to repave the pavements, keep the ridges going, fix things that you own today. So most of the excise tax in gasoline goes straight into that today, and that's strictly a Caltrans choice of what the priorities are, and they put that through the California Transportation Commission. The commission actually decides that. The STIP, the State Transportation Improvement Plan, the piece that's used for funding new infrastructure, most of that is funded today through actually the sales tax on gasoline. And again, that goes through the CTC. They do a fund estimate. There's a formula that tells each area what is available to us. It's broken up into several parts, but the primary parts are 25% interregional. So to go from like LA to Fresno, or from Fresno to the Bay Area, things that are traveling between major metropolitan areas. Caltrans proposes those projects. There's certain routes that are designated that they can use those funds on. The other 75% goes into the regional areas, into the congested regional areas. It's called the RTIP. So each regional agency, like in this case, LA Metro, we have a recommended portion of those funds that are available to us, and then we can propose projects that are programmed into the STIP. So we send those directly to the California Transportation Commission. They don't go through Caltrans, we send them directly there. We propose a mixture of transit and highway projects for our STIP fund. I anticipate we'll do the same thing again this coming year with whatever funds that we're receiving, and then they program them out in the last 2 years of the STIP. So there's a 5-year cycle. New funds going to the last 2 years. Now, in most areas, metropolitan areas like Los Angeles, we have what we call a self-help. We're a self-help county. We have our own sales tax here that is dedicated to transportation. We have actually 3 of them. First one was Prop 8 in the 1980s. It goes all to transit. There is a piece that's locally turned, it goes back to your local cities for using things that are related to transit. Then there was Proposition C in the mid-90s. That has a piece that, again, goes to transit. There's a small piece of it, 25%, Prop C25 we call, is dedicated for rubber tire transit, because the first 2 were really primarily new rail lines. So there's a piece for helping bus lines or areas where transit might run. So most of the HOV lane system in Los Angeles County was built using that Proposition C type of funds. Now we have new Measure R. So Measure R has specific funds dedicated for certain projects. Through most of it, there's a few amorphous areas like South Bay where it just says money for congestion reduction, and South Bay's creating a plan and bringing it to our board for approval on what those funds are for. when you look at the self-help counties, the LA's, OCTA, Orange County's one, Riverside's one, San Bernardino's one, San Diego's one, Imperial's one. When you look at Southern California, the projected funding for transportation over the next 30 years, if I recall my numbers correctly, this would be close, 75 or 80% of that money that we're going to transportation, all sources, transit, bikeways, maintenance, rehab, everything, will come from self-help counties. So it's the local dollars that will be the bulk of funding for the next anticipated 30 years in transportation here in Southern California.
So is MTA involved in the RTIP or the STIP process right now, and is going to acknowledge or deal with this projected 8% decrease?
If it is an 8% decrease, I mean, I'm not disputing your number. I haven't had a chance to see it yet.
CTC's website.
We will get an allocation, and we will propose projects based upon the allocation we receive. So they'll say, here's your number. We'll say, okay, we'd like to fund A, B, and C. Is how we usually do it. And we go through an internal analysis of prioritization. Actually, we have a long-range transportation plan that the board's already adopted. We try and go down that for the next priorities. And then you take that to the board for ratification. That's our process. All right, and
But what about the projects for which you don't seem to know what the cost will be?
well, 710, it depends on the alternative that's selected. When the draft environmental document comes out,
Which is a huge range.
yes, it is a huge range.
How do you pick a number when you're allocated?
I don't think we're going to pick that one for the STIP. I don't think we're going to. I would not expect. Yeah, the STIP is a 5-year program. You're filling the last 2 years of it. I'm not
That's right,
anticipating
but the last 2
710 will be
years-
proposed if that's your question.
We're on the last 2 years of the cycle, or what do you mean by the last 2 years?
Every 2 years, the California Transportation Commission adopts a new 5-year funding plan. So 2 years go by, they have 3 years programmed, and they adopt a new 2 years at the other end of it. So that's how we do transportation funding here in California. And this is the only state I've worked in, so it's the only one I know about. I don't know how others do it. Okay, I'm getting the board one. Bart, I'm going to guess that we hit the maximum extent practical tolerance.
For every extra minute Doug talks, then I don't have to talk. And let's face the book. I have Tom Rubin here, and Tom is going to now talk about something for the next half hour. No, seriously, is my